Join me over here at the computer. I'm going to look up some images that maybe we can use in our shrink paper making our charms.
I'm so glad that you've joined me for my video today where I'm going to show you how I've made charms with shrink plastic. If you might remember playing around with Shrinky Dinks, that is what we're going to do today, but we are printing out our own images. So I've gone to places like Creative Fabrica and other places that I have cute images that I think will make great little charms and stuff, and I'm going to print those out. Now at the end of this video, I'm going to give you all the details on the size of the images that have worked best for me. I'm going to talk about other things, the way that you should print the images, things that I've gone through, the hard knocks of everything, and worked out what has worked and what has not to make the best little images and eventually our little charms, or whatever you want to make of these. So after we've printed this out, now I'm going to show you, this is what you need. You need some shrink plastic, and I'll put a link below of where you can find some of this plastic. You're going to just print this out on your printer, and these are some of the original prints that I printed out. And this one sample right here is about a 3x3 image. Now I eventually go down to a smaller size as my optimal one, and if you'll notice how bright those images are. Now this little cat image I got off Creative Fabrica, and it was listed as a shrink image. It came out a little bit larger than I like. This particular image right here is one of my favorite, and you saw all the different ones that I had printed out on that sheet. What I'm going to do with each of these images is I go about and I do basically some fussy cutting. I like to leave just a little bit of white around that black edge. Now you're going to see later on in the images that I have shrunk that you do not have to be perfect in your cutting. When the images shrunk, a lot of your imperfections from your cutting go away. Even if you have some sharp images, you can take or sharp edges, you can take a little bit of sandpaper and just kind of soften it up a little bit. But I have found that even if I didn't have a perfect cut, you really can't notice it when it's shrunk. So I'm also using a regular hole punch for any of these that I'm adding a hole to, and that hole is going to shrink as well. So now I'm going over to my work area that I'm going to use my heating tool that I really use for embossing normally, and I have a little metal and wood pin that I use to hold it in place because it's very hot. You do not want to touch this. Now, as far as I've not tried it, but everything I've read, a regular hair dryer will not work with this. Some people even put, well, normally a lot of people put their Shrinky Dinks in an oven. I do not do that just because my heating tool works and it's very quick. I am using it here and showing you. You'll see how it shrinks up. I usually put that little pin there that I'm holding in the hole, and I also have my little glass paperweight that I'm going to use to press down on the little plastic image. Again, it's very hot. Do not touch it immediately. Now, after it is flattened out a little bit, you have this cute little charm. The hole has shrunk, the entire image has shrunk, and you can see how it compares here to where it was originally cut out. So as I'm going to tell you a little bit later about what that dimension is from the original, we'll see that, but I think these turn out so nicely. Now these here in this little blue container are some of the first ones that I did, and their original cutout was a little bit larger than the one that I did with the little turtle. And also I played around with some of the coloring, and we're going to talk about that at the end. This is the image that was cut from that Creative Fabrica kitten. It's about a half of an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper in dimension there. Now with this image, it didn't turn out great, and I used some glossy accents. It doesn't turn out to be my favorite thing to do. But I wanted to show you another one of these because I'm going to highlight. You're going to see the completed charm here at the end. I did these little bird houses and they turned out so cute, I think. And it's just the same process. Once you can cut out your little image, and then you're going to use your heating tool and shrink those down. This was one of my favorites, so I wanted to make sure that I showed you the process on this. It just really takes a few seconds to get it going, and then we're going to flatten it out with our paperweight. This is one of the favorites of mine. The coloring is just great.
Let's take a look at some of the finished charms I have, and I'm going to explain to you some of the techniques that I used, why they turned out the way they did. I'm going to follow up with some lessons learned for you. Now, first of all, let's just start with the first set that I worked on. What I learned from these, I printed these out at full 100%, and the issue is here that the color gets very concentrated when it shrinks, especially this image here. Now, I did also add some glossy accents to this, and I've gone ahead and put the jump ring on it so you can see exactly how I would use these as charms. I'm not sure if I like the glossy accents, and of course, you can't hardly even tell out what the image is. It's a little strawberry jam container with 2 strawberries on the edge. The colors are too concentrated. And even with this wave, I've got the little hole right here that you can see. I haven't added a jump ring yet, but the color is just very deep blue. It's hard to even see the images on top. The cat is not that bad, but it did not shrink down an awful lot. I had gotten this image off of Creative Fabrica, and it was actually like a half a sheet of paper, and it came down to this size here. And then I also found this little owl, and what I was trying here is when I cut it out, I just kept an open spot at the top so that I could trim the hole and then not upset the image itself. Now on the back of all these images, I just have the white. I have not added any paint or anything, and I have seen that some people do paint the back sides of theirs and also use a glaze that I'm going to share with you next. Before I get into the glaze, let me share with you these little, I'm still going to call them charms. I didn't punch a hole out of any of these because I thought these would be cute little figures to add to my projects. I can glue them on top, add them to something. I could put them on paper clips. There's a whole bunch of different things, but I didn't put a hole. Now, another thing to think about with these Shrinky Dink charms, this is to me the benefit of when you have an image that you want to print out and use for something, but yet you want it to have a little bit of thickness. This is, you know, it's got some thickness to it. It's not just paper. And so that's the beauty of the Shrinky Dinks. It's on some kind of plastic. You can hear that with a little bit of a depth to it. So here, when I printed these out, now I think the ghost turned out pretty well because it's mainly this white image, and so you can see the little eyes and all the other things, but you can tell this is still when I printed out at 100%. And even like this little umbrella, it was so pretty. Even the ice cream cone, it was so bright and vibrant before I shrunk them down. But when you shrink them down, those colors are going to become concentrated and it gets really dark. So I'm still planning to use these, and I wanted to share them with you, but I think I've got a better solution. These next images are some of my favorite, and they came out, I think, the best in terms of coloring. So the difference here is when I printed these images, before I printed them onto my Shrinky Dinks, I went down to a transparency of 62%. Now that number is not set in stone, and you may want to play with it a little bit. But that's the number that I have gone with to print out these. Look at this bright colors, the bright colors that you get. I love those. I have the little holes in the top that I can add my jump rings to and make my little charms. These are my favorite. There's nothing on the back side, and the size of these are approximately 3/4 of an inch. These started at 2.5 by 2.5, and I'm going to give you all these numbers here at the end to give you a little wrap up of everything. But these turned out to be, I think, my favorite little charms. I also did these little bird houses, and they were very pretty images. I wanted to see how the flowers were going to turn out, but I think it's also the starting image. You can just see the difference between this little one right here with these bright colors, and then you have the more subdued colors. But I do think these are better than the ones that turned out to be more concentrated. These were done at the 62% transparency, and so I think that's why you can really tell what these images are. They will be perfect for any little bird houses or any kind of little trinkets that I want to make for charms for this. These have no glaze or anything on them. For these three that were printed out at the 62% transparency, I did use this Krylon triple thick crystal clear glaze. I picked this up at Hobby Lobby. It was around $8, and I sprayed this on the outside. I've got this video here showing just a little bit of how I did this. I allowed this to sit for 24 hours. Now, you're probably not going to pick anything up on the camera, but when I look at these compared to, let's say, this, I do see a little bit of, it almost looks like a little crystal effect on top of the ones that have the clear glaze, as opposed to those with not anything. Now, the things that I have read said you should use the glaze to protect the coloring. Now, because I'm just going to be using my charms on my own personal charms that I'm making for my books and that sort of thing, I probably am not going to go with the glaze unless I find that my other charms over here are not holding their color. I think I'm just going to go plainly with printing at that 62% and shrinking down to that size and not using the glaze. There's nothing wrong. It's just, it subdues the color just a little bit. The last of the images that I wanted to show, it's not quite dry all the way, but I put some glossy accents on one of the ones printed at 62%. And I was ready to show this to you quickly. Again, it's not dry all the way, but I think, again, I'm just liking my images on their own to use as these charms. So now that you've seen all of my images here, my charms that I've made, let's wrap up and I'm going to show you some of my lessons learned.
So after playing around with the shrink plastic and making the charms that I wanted to share a couple of the lessons learned for you. So according to all the documentation, when you get your shrink plastic, you're going to be able to reduce down to about 1/3 of your original size and 9 times the thickness. Now, I can't measure that 9 times thickness because I don't really have the measuring tools to do that, but I can confirm the 1/3 original size. So the charms that I like the best, which are the ones on this background that are on the far left and far right size, those started out at 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches each. And now after shrinking those, they're down to 3/4 by 3/4 of an inch. So those are perfect sizes that I can use on my journals, any kind of bookmarks, anything that I'm planning to use with my little charms. I like that size. And so that's the one that I'm going with for now. Now, in terms of printing, I found that when I would find my images on places like Creative Fabrica, any kind of online free printable images, whatever, when I print those regular print on my shrink plastic, that worked a lot better than doing the photo printing, because I did do one of them with the photo print and it seemed to smear a little bit, and it uses a lot of ink for that. And remember, we're shrinking down. We really don't want a whole bunch of ink, because that's one of the reasons we're setting our transparency down to 62%. That's the transparency I used. you play with it. And it could vary from image to image what kind of transparency you want to use. But the 62% worked really well for the images that turned out the best for me. Now, after making these, my original reason for playing around with the shrink plastic, was to make charms, but some of these I can turn into magnets. Just add a little magnet to the back. They're perfect for little trinkets. Add any kind of adhesive on the back to add little stickers. Any kind of printable image that you like, but that you want to give it a little bit of thickness, or just give it that extra texture that comes with using this shrink plastic, this is perfect. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Grab some shrink plastic, do some printing, and make these cute little images.